Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and boy do we ever have quite the interesting figure to take a look at today. Talk about a controversial release. This one may be one of the most controversial releases from Papo ever, as we have their Concavenator. Now this is a figure that honestly is so ugly that I actually considered not even buying it, but of course I ended up getting it anyway because that's just the way I work. I try to keep my Papo dinosaur line as complete as possible, so even when they release an ugly figure, I do still like to buy it. I do still like to help support the company and make sure that, you know, they continue making dinosaurs, because even if they do release an ugly figure, I still have high hopes for them to release other winners in the future, and I would hate to see them, you know, continue to decrease the amount of prehistoric figures that they release. In fact, I really hope they start to increase it, because we've had a drastic drop when it comes to the amount of figures they release over the last few years, although it wasn't too bad this year. But you can see the Concavenator again is not exactly what I would have expected. Had somebody told me a few years ago that Papo was going to make a Concavenator, I would not have expected this to be their Concavenator. Now, Papo will from time to time kind of give us something a little different, a little unique, but this one has that going for it, but it's just a little bit too unique, if you ask me. And honestly, the figure itself, I can get on board with the quills. I think the quill thing is actually kind of cool, and it could be a really nice touch to a figure like this. For instance, if you've ever seen the Sean Cooper version, like the Star Ace version of the Concavenator, it has quills. It is absolutely incredible. That's probably where they got the idea for this, was from a paleo artist that had released a Concavenator at some point with quills, potentially the Sean Cooper one, because we know Papo likes to take their inspiration from many other places. But the dinosaur, body-wise, you know, doesn't look like the absolute worst thing in the world. I don't think it looks great by any means, especially the scrawny legs we have, but the figure as a whole can kind of sort of look okay, except for maybe the tail. But once you get to that head sculpt is just atrocious looking. It just looks so rough. So I really don't know what happened here. I don't know if they hired a different sculptor, somebody that doesn't normally work for Papo. Whoever the sculptor of this one is, I can only assume was probably the same sculptor that gave us that horrible Protoceratops, which in my opinion is probably the worst Papo figure of all time. I actually think this one has the possibility of beating it out, but I think, unfortunately for that Protoceratops, it's going to stay the worst figure ever, because this one, although it's terrible, I don't know if anything can really compete with the Protoceratops. Regardless, right now we're going to go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at this and check it out from there. So, this is the ugly head sculpt I am talking about. Look at how awful that looks. Like, wow, that is just on another level of awful. Like, I don't even know what company I would compare that head sculpt to, because, you know, some companies that at times make really bad figures as far as their designs go, like, you know, Schleich, I like a lot of what Schleich produces, but there are times where they create figures that just look so ridiculous, and this is even worse somehow than what I would expect to see from a Schleich release. Like, it's just really bad. You can see, though, that one thing that is at least a little bit okay is the actual paint application, though I'm not a huge fan of the paint scheme they've gone with. I think the actual application of the paint does look, you know, fairly decent. We've got like a light tone here, dry brushed over a darker tone for the lower jaw, which does help to make a lot of that scale detail pop. You see the same thing up here on the upper side. It honestly looks like that's how the majority of the figure was probably painted, was by using like dry brushing techniques. Maybe it's a dark wash for all, you know, a few areas, but definitively we've got dry brushing on the lower jaw. But you can see we have a lighter tone here in the palette, a darker tone there back in the eye socket area, and then you can see the nostril, which is absolutely gigantic, is highlighted with a darker tone. You've got some more dry brushing up here with these scoots that run up and over the top of the snout. You also have a few scoots kind of running over the eye area that have been very sloppily painted with an orange, so that area doesn't look so great, but a lot of the other areas do kind of look okay as far as the paintwork. The eye is painted with nothing but a black coloration. I don't see any kind of a pupil or anything, and in fact I don't even really see a gloss coat, maybe slightly on the eye, but it's not super obvious. We do have an articulated jaw, but one thing that is a little bit of a bummer about it is it's actually really loose, and I'm shocked that it's actually staying where it is. Maybe it's because I have it kind of on an angle, kind of looking at it right now, but the jaw itself is pretty loose, and sometimes it doesn't stay shut. It does fall open a little bit. You can see the inside of the mouth does look pretty nice, though. We've got a pretty nicely sculpted tongue in there. Some, okay detailing, maybe a little generic as far as that goes, but there's like a reddish wash or something, or a dark wash of some kind that's been applied in there to kind of make that detail pop, which does look okay, and there's a little bit of a glossy look to the inside of the mouth. The teeth do also look pretty nice. I like the sculpting of them, and the paintwork is pretty good. No real sloppiness for either the upper jaw or the lower jaw, maybe slightly right there in that one spot on the lower jaw, but for the most part, I think the teeth actually look pretty good when it comes to the sculpting and paintwork on the dinosaur here. You can see the jaw looks a little crooked, though, as I'm closing it right there. You see it's definitely crooked, and then we have to push it over, because again, look here, there you can see how it's loose. It just kind of falls back open. So definitely not a great articulated jaw as far as this figure goes. As you move up into the back of the neck, you can see the quills are sculpted out. They look okay. For the most part, they have a dark tone, almost like a dark bluish tone. And then they've sort of dry brushed the orange over the quills. It looks okay, a little bit heavy when it comes to the paintwork in certain spots, but not too terrible. But I will say the actual application of the head looks pretty good over here, because the head is definitely, or was definitely, a separate piece from the body. And you can really notice it once you turn it around here. First of all, you can see the seam where the head was connected, but up here on the top where the head kind of leads in and the quills come up, you can almost see kind of like a little separation right here, which looks pretty ugly when it comes to those quills. Definitely takes away from the, natural looking aspect of this figure. But then again, not much about this looks very natural. As you lead down the course of the body, you do have that darker tone running along the upper part of the back. You have very large scoots running down along the side of the dinosaur, as well as kind of bumpier scales showing up here and there, kind of like osteoderms in certain spots, and then kind of finer skin texture kind of meshed and mixed within all of that. You have a greenish tone for a large portion of the body, but as you move down here into the underside of the throat, you can see we have a brighter orange, which is the same tone that we have for the quills up there on the top. You have almost what looks to be like a throat beard here going on for the Concavenator. So basically we've got more quills kind of leading off of the throat, which I think is also pretty strange. Definitely a very weird look for the figure. As you move down, you can see the orange again is applied kind of okay, but definitely not the smoothest transition from the green down into the orange, especially right here. You can see it's a little ugly. As you lead down here, I think the transitioning becomes a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer. As you lead down the arm, you can see the arm has some nice muscle definition. We lead down with the orange down into the green again. As you lead into the lower part of the arm, you can see some dry brushing that's been added to it. The fingers are sculpted pretty decently, and we have a nice glossy black for the nails. Kind of makes me actually wonder if we could see a gloss coat on the eye over here. Kind of, but not really. It looks like there's also a lighter tone that sort of circles around the eye right there. But as you move back down into the arm, you have more quills leading off of the back of the arm here, again dry brushed out with that orange. As we lead up into the stomach region, we continue to see the same style of skin texture for the most part through the course of the figure. You can see a few skin wrinkles and skin folds, but nothing all that impressive right there. I do like that we still have that darker tone. Again, I don't know if it's a dry brushing of the green or if we have a dark wash on this, but I do like that it adds a little extra color variation. Again, the paintwork does look fairly decent in some areas. You do have another line of kind of scoots moving along the back here of the dinosaur that's sort of like, come crawling out of those quills, and it looks like we've got a small area of feathering right there, and then we have these scoots that run down here until we get to that classic hump in the back of the Concavenator, which you can see again. We just basically have the same style of skin texture and then the same green, but then as we lead up here, we have the orange returning here for the remainder of the figure running down along the back of those humps as well as the rest of the tail. As you lead down here into the leg, you can kind of make out the muscle definition. It looks okay. Kind of make out the knee as well. We have more scoots running down the front of the leg here, down into the foot sculpt. The foot sculpt looks okay for what it is. You can see the nails are again painted with that glossy black, very glossy. I think the legs are kind of scrawny. Well, not kind of. They're definitely scrawny, especially as you lead down from the thigh into the calf area. It gets really quite scrawny. As you lead out here into the tail, though, you can see we've got a really strong curve for the tail here. The orange here disappears along the underside. You can see it's basically all over the place down here on the underside. That actually looks like Wow, that's very strange. It almost looks like the rib cage is showing on the underside of the dinosaur. So maybe this thing is starting to kind of rot away, and it honestly looks like the skin has been removed, and now the rib cage is kind of showing here on the underside of the dinosaur. I don't know what the mentality was there for that, but that is just very strange and kind of disturbing. Anyway, as we lead back down here, it almost looks like maybe there's a cloaca there, but I don't think that that's actually what it was meant to be. I think that's just like a random part of the sculpt, but it almost looks like they were attempting to give us a cloaca. But you can see we've got a very strong curve to the tail. There's another seam right there where you can see that that section of the tail was applied, and it's not hidden at all. As you move down to the tail, though, you can see we end with some more of those quills, which again I think just looks really ugly. Definitely not my cup of tea when it comes to the way they've utilized the quills on this figure. Like I said, it can look really cool, especially when it comes to a Concavenator. If you take a look at the Sean Cooper one, if you haven't seen it, definitely search the Concavenator from Star Ace with the Wonders of the Wild series. Check out the playlist that I have for Star Ace here on the channel and check that one out when it comes to their Concavenator with quills. So much better than this. But you can see this side looks pretty much as the other side did. The legs aren't really too different as far as the positioning, but this leg is taking a step a little bit further forward, and we have a slight tilt to the ankle here. But again, we have that really scrawny calf and everything as you move down. The arm is held into the body on this side, so the arm's a little harder to distinguish, especially when it comes to those quills. They just kind of mesh there in with the body. I think maybe a different coloration than what we had in the stomach could have been, you know, something that would have made those quills stand out a little bit better. You can see a seam right here as you lead down into the arm as well. And again, the hand kind of held into the body in that area where it looks like the rib cage is showing. And then you lead back up again into the neck. So ultimately, it's definitely one of the worst looking figures that I've ever seen from Papo. And now actually taking a closer look at it, I think the paint apps aren't quite as nice as I thought they were initially. You know, definitely has some areas where it looks pretty okay, but then other areas where it looks absolutely horrendous. So I really don't know what to say about this one other than it's probably right behind the Protoceratops as one of the worst Papo figures of all time. As far as a size goes, for a length from the tail to the snout, you're looking at about 6 inches and like an eighth, so, you know, just a little over 6 inches, or around 15.5 centimeters, maybe a little hair over, closing in on 16 centimeters, but not really quite there. As far as a height goes, a little under 4 inches or closing in on 10 centimeters, but not quite there either. You can see, you know, especially with my hand in here, it's not a large figure by any means, definitely a bit on the smaller side. And for a comparison to show you that, we've got Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being here next to our Papo Concavenator. And man, what a world of difference you can see between old Papo with that T-Rex compared to new Papo with this Concavenator. Normally, companies continue to improve, whereas Papo, although they have released some good marine reptiles this year, but something is wrong here. I don't know what's happening with their dinosaurs. They are absolutely going in the wrong direction when it comes to those. Whoever the sculptor is currently for Papo when it comes to their dinosaurs, they definitely need to find someone else that knows a little bit more about what they're doing. Or, again, even the older sculptor, whoever that may have been, I'm really not sure. But, the Concavenator and the T-Rex look honestly like two different companies had made them. Then for a figure that is of a very similar size range, we have a Mattel Velociraptor, which you can see is honestly almost like the exact same size as the Concavenator. So if you happen to have a Mattel Velociraptor, you'll definitely have a good idea of the size of this Concavenator. And then for a few totally randoms, we have the recent PNSO Yanchuanosaurus here, which you can see is kind of a similar size to the Papo Concavenator as well as the TNG Cryolophosaurus, which you can see is absolutely awesome next to the Concavenator from Papo. And again, I almost feel bad doing these comparisons because I'm basically being like, look at how great these other companies are and how bad Papo's doing currently. I really do kind of feel bad for showing them off, but you can see, again, pretty similar in size when it comes to these two, obviously very different poses. And if you are a Papo collector, then this comparison should help you out, as we have the Papo Carnotaurus, which you can see the Carnotaurus is definitely, again, a very similar size to the Concavenator. And yet again, this is another instance where you look at these two and it is like night and day. Like that Papo Carnotaurus is awesome, like absolutely gorgeous. The sculpt, the paint, everything on that is just so beautifully done. And then you've got this Concavenator over here. I just really don't know what happened. So this brand new Papo Concavenator is definitely not a good figure, and in fact I kind of wanted to wait until I saw it in person before really forming my opinion on it, because a lot of people seem to be kind of dead set on hating certain figures straight from the start. As soon as they see the promotional images, like they're absolutely against that figure. I'm not that way. You know, I can of course have an opinion about it straight out of the gate. When I see the promo images and stuff, I can think to myself, well, it doesn't look very good to me, but I'll have to wait until I see it in person. And that's always the way I think about things, is I want to see it in person to see how I feel about it then, because you never know what it's going to look like from the promo images to the final product. Sometimes it's a bad angle, sometimes the figure just, you know, gets changed up a little bit from the promotional prototype to the actual factory released figure. But this is one of those instances where honestly it does not get better with this Concavenator. In fact, I think it actually looks even worse than the original prototype did. The sculpt is kind of highly detailed. You know, it's got some decent detail throughout, so it at least has that kind of going for it. I wouldn't say it's nearly as highly detailed as what we usually see from Papo, or even remotely close to as highly detailed as many other companies are producing nowadays, but it has some okay detail to it. The pose is kind of awkward, but almost classic Papo with the tail on the ground, because they really do like that, you know, sort of pose. They do it quite often with their dinosaurs, and you know, that at least kind of screams Papo, but that's really about it. Once you move through the course of the figure, you look at how awkward the design is, how strange the figure is as a whole when it comes to the sculpt, especially in the head. I think the head is absolutely the worst area of the figure. It's just so strange looking, and in my opinion really does not look at all like a Concavenator head sculpt should. It honestly is almost just embarrassing to look at that head sculpt. I don't know how somebody sculpted this out, and I really hate to be mean, because I don't like being mean about anything. You know, somebody did sculpt this out. They put work into this, and they probably had hopes that it would be good, so it you know, pains me at times to say mean things about figures, but when you go from the quality of what Papo used to have compared to what they have currently with this Concavenator, like, it's sad, honestly, it really is. The paint job looks okay in certain areas, but other areas not so great. Some of the paint application is nicely done. Some areas like the quills and stuff, the paint's a little thick. It doesn't look very good, especially when you look at the arm kind of held into the stomach, and the fact that we have the same color there for the stomach. Like, it all kind of blends together. You almost don't even notice the arm or the quills in there. But, you know, the paint job could be worse. I have seen definitely worse paint jobs from Papo recently. Like, if you look at the paint job of their Styracosaurus last year, I think it was, and their Protoceratops, both of those paint jobs are worse than what we see with this one. But that being said, again, some areas are nicely painted, like the inside of the mouth is great, but then you move through other areas and it just doesn't look very good. So as a whole, this is definitely not a great figure, and definitely not a figure that I would recommend grabbing unless you really want to complete your Papo collection like I do. Then I would say grab it. And if you are going to grab it, of course, I would link you guys to Everything Dinosaur, because that's where I grabbed mine. Probably one of the greatest dinosaur websites of all time. Love Everything Dinosaur. They're just so good at what they do. They take so much care in their customers and in the orders that go out to their customers. So definitely a great place to order from. If you never have ordered from Everything Dinosaur, you absolutely need to. And again, you could grab this Concavenator from Everything Dinosaur right now, which I will include a link to in the description. So if you are interested, check that out. Grab this very, very strange Concavenator, and also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.